Hi guys, and welcome to the channel. In this episode we're gonna tackle the ceiling of the Transit. So that is soundproofing, insulation, and then paneling using tongue and groove cedar. For those who are just joining in, I'm converting Ford Transit all-wheel drive 148-inch wheelbase mid-roof. In this episode we'll focus on the ceiling again, so thank you for joining, and I hope you'll find some valuable information in here. So I'm going to start from the front of the van towards the rear. For sound deadening, I will use kill mat, which is what everybody's been using. It works really well. It's kind of rubberized sheet on one side that's self-adhesive and then shiny on the other side. The length of this section of the roof is 60 centimeters. The kill mat is exactly 40 centimeters, so I'll leave a 10 centimeter gap at each end, which I've already marked with a marker here. And there's some kind of line in the roof, which I will use to line up the two pieces so they're the same. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but might as well make it look nice. One detail of importance for us here in Canada working in the winter, and that's me particularly, kill mat says that the sheet metal should be at 12 degrees Celsius at least or higher for the adhesive to adhere properly. So I cranked up the heat in the shop to get 12 degrees. So the metal's nice and warm, and I'm gonna apply the two first ones, and you'll see how that goes. So I like to remove only a small section of the backing paper so I can place the sheet in place, adjust it before I glue it, and then I'll peel the rest of the paper. There we go, the first one's in place. So as I've done before, I'll use a heavy-duty roller to apply it properly. Start from the middle towards the edges. This way, if there are any air bubbles, they'll gradually be pushed out towards the edge. So the kill mat's really easy to work with. It's easy to cut. It looks thick, but it's actually fairly soft, so it bends and follows the contour of the body pretty well. You just cut it with a blade. In order to insulate the headliner of the Transit, you need to bring it down, and the first thing to do is to remove the blobs for the airbags that you find on both sides. And now I'll have room to lower the headliner. There's just a couple plastic fasteners, actually one here and one down there. Pop those out using this tool. The plastic fasteners, let me show you. So next, using the exact same technique and same tools, you need to pop out 3 fasteners. So one here, one in the middle, and then one on the right side. The next thing is to undo the bolts that you will find at the end of the shelf, supporting the shelf. They're 7mm bolts, which you can reach when the door is open. Let me show you. So there's one here and one there. Now remember, for reassembly, the long one goes towards the rear, the short one goes towards the windshield. Next, we have to remove the sun visors. So there's a little plastic protector that you can pop out. Underneath, you will find a screw with a Torx T25 head. Finally, you'll find 4 large plastic covers that you have to pull out in order to reveal, as I've done here, the last bolt. Those are a little bit tricky to remove without damage. I went on the part towards the windshield with a knife blade. Just push it vertical in a couple times until you get it in, and just pry out that thing. It comes out, it's just pushed in. And here too you'll find 4 7mm screws that you can easily undo. So my idea is not to remove the headliner completely, but give myself enough space to be able to slide in some insulate insulation, glue it in place. So I think this is good enough as it is. I can reach in there and apply the glue and the insulate later. So I'm going to cut a measure and cut a piece of insulate and put it in. So from the windshield to this crossbar, the insulate is glued to the ceiling. And before I close this, I'm going to stuff more insulate all along here on the inside. Now I have seen some people on YouTube remove this piece here. That's unnecessary because it's attached to the shelf, which you will lower down anyway, so this will come down with it. If you want to completely remove the shelf, you'll probably have to undo this to undo the connectors and so on. But if you leave it in place, then it makes, I think, your job easier. It's going to be hard for you guys to see, but I pushed some insulate here inside this channel. That's actually kind of a pain to slide it. I started from this hole here on this side, pushed it towards the end, and then slid the rest back in here. It's a bit of a pain to do, but the black side actually slides pretty well, and the white, I assume, just the same. So I got the piece to come out here. All I have to do now is install the bolts for the shelf support, and that will be it. Before I can insulate and panel the ceiling, I have to run all the electrical lines that go inside the ceiling. Once the ceiling is closed, you no longer have access to it. So as you can see, all my lines run through this flexible tubing so that they'll never run there against the sheet metal. Like there's no single cable that will run loose in the ceiling. Even just a single line that will go, this one's going to go on the other side to an overhead light, runs through this conduit. This way I'm sure that there will never be a short circuit. It would be easier to run through some of the gaps or small holes and just run the bare cable inside the metal, but I just don't like this idea. To me it's unsafe, it's dangerous. The cables run in the conduit and then through the sheet metal, but the cables are not exposed. Looking at this section here at the front, I realized that there is nothing that will allow me to support the tongue and groove. There's a cross member here back there, but then there's this long section that's probably a good 60 centimeters that doesn't offer any support at all, any way to screw the tongue and groove at the end here, and I don't want it to flap around when I drive. I cut 3 pieces of 1/4 inch plywood, and then I already cut another piece of 1/2 inch plywood that will go in between like this. So at the front near the cab, I have these 3 pieces of plywood glued to the ceiling. The insulation comes all around, and then later I will screw with 3 screws another piece of plywood that will now come across and will allow the tongue and groove paneling to come and rest on, and I'll be able to screw the ends onto that strip of plywood. And at the rear, I've removed the fasteners that were holding this factory cable in place. I glued these self-adhesive bases, which allow me to run plastic ties through, like so. And that allows me to raise that cable well against the ceiling, so it's not going to be in the way of my tongue and groove, which will come lower. And then I will be able to glue in place a strip of plywood that's cut with the same shape as the ceiling. And once I've determined the exact height, then my tongue and groove paneling will just come and rest here. Using a 3M90 spray contact cement and then 3M insulate, I insulated the whole ceiling. I stuffed some insulate in the cavities on both sides. I haven't done any lower than that yet because I'm focusing on the ceiling right now. I think what I'll do next is start cutting the furring strips out of 1/2-inch plywood. I will mount them using rivet nuts in the factory holes. I don't want to drill any holes. So a couple of tips: make sure you wear latex gloves when you work with the 3M spray. It will save your fingers from being all sticky and having to use solvent to clean them later. The other thing is, make sure you work in a well-ventilated area because the contact cement will release toxic fumes. You wear a mask as well. I'm in the process of applying a vapor barrier. A lot of moisture is generated inside the vehicle when we sleep in it, cook. So next I'll go around the edges and apply tension and secure it in place with the metallic tape. I divided the ceiling in two halves just to make it easier for myself because again I'm working alone, so that it's a little bit challenging. I started putting the rivet nuts in place to secure the furring strips. In the middle is an M6. A few inches on each side you'll find another hole for an M6 rivet. Further down there's a large hole, but just before it there's a smaller hole for an M5 rivet nut. And then at the very end there are two M8 holes. I'm gonna use not the last one towards the side but the one before that. I think that'll be enough to give the furring strip the curvature and secure it tightly in place. So if you don't know what the rivet nuts are, they're these kind of tubes with a flat end that you can push through the metal in a properly sized hole, and then using a tool like this you just squeeze this rivet back so it becomes trapped in the sheet metal. Quite convenient. So just so you can see, I'll install one at the end here. So you start with the tool wide open, the rivet nut screwed on it, put it inside the hole, tighten the two handles. Let's see. Unscrew the tool from the rivet nut. And this is it. You have an M8 nut captive in the sheet metal. I reinstalled the two foam blobs for the airbags that go in the corner, which was a good thing because my insulation was too tight, but it's all done now. All the wires are coming through for the pot lights. So I cut the 4 furring strips for the ceiling. They're 1/2-inch plywood by 8 centimeters wide, so just under 2 inches. And I'm going to try to show you the first one that I cut to size now, to length. The first one I tapered the end, and I'm gonna see how that works. I'm going to try to show you just because it's at an angle. I'm test fitting the first fairing strip. I drilled the first 8 mm hole and put a bolt in it, and it seems to be working quite well. So what I'll do, I'll keep drilling the other holes and then test the whole thing. And if that works, I think I'll try to transfer the measurements to the next fairing strip. All my fairing strips are in place for me to start cutting and then placing the tongue and groove cedar paneling. But before I can do that, I have to do something that nobody looks forward to, and that is wrapping these ugly foam blobs that basically cover the rear of the side airbags. So as you can see, I've already trimmed them. The end piece is just chopped off 4 inches, maybe not quite 3. And I've already masked the headliner, so when I come to spray the contact cement on the foam blob, I won't overspray on the headliner. And the trick is in wrapping fabric all around so that when it's done it looks nice. But like the main part here and underneath here by the pillar, that's a bit tricky because there's quite a sharp angle. So I've already pulled the plastic cover for the pillar, just enough that I can push the fabric behind. If you're watching this video, you've probably already come across the video by AVC Rig. It's the best one to do this job. They have a nice short but to the point tutorial. Now they're working on a high roof transit. I'm working on a mid roof. So the blobs are a little bit different, which doesn't change any of the technique, but just for the dimension of the fabric, they are recommending a piece of 38 by 30 inches for each blob. I think mine are being smaller. I'll go with 30 by 30 and see how that works out. So for this job, just make sure you have a good pair of scissors for cutting fabric and a sharp blade with a brand new blade for trimming. So I'm spraying contact cement on the blob. Now I'll spray contact cement on the fabric itself and bring it here. I've made good progress, but I have some creases here in the corner that I'm having a hard time smoothing. I don't know if I want to try to do any better than this. The problem I have is the glue dries actually maybe a bit too fast for me. So I have to reapply some as I go. And the challenge is not to make a mess. Okay, ABC recommends pulling it out and doing it all over again, and I think it's not a bad idea. I'm kind of satisfied, but not completely. I've got creases here in this corner which won't disappear. And here I made my relief cuts too deep so they show behind the headliner. I'll probably be the only one to see it, but and same here actually. I underestimated how deep this section is, so I made cuts that come way too far out. So peel it off and do it again. Well, I think I've got the first one done. It took me 3 tries. So third time's a charm, as they say. But yeah, I'm happy with it. I found the trickiest part to be actually the corner here. I don't know if I can show you, but this corner here is where there's a lot of tension. So the fabric that I'm using seems to be working quite well for this sort of thing. It's kind of a, looks like jeans, texture on the outside. Dark blue with some gray in it, but the back is a sort of felt. So it has some thickness to it, but at the same time it seems to take the glue quite well, stretch enough to do this sort of thing. So I'm quite happy with that. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but it's quite nice. And the idea is that we'll use the same fabric to cover our bench seat cushions. All right, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this, but I've wrapped both blobs. The passenger side is at least as challenging as the other one. I wasn't too sure what to do with the edge here, if I should leave the fabric go all the way to the gasket, the door gasket, or not. I ended up trimming it. I think it looks nicer, and I'll see later when I get to those areas what I'm gonna do with them. But that is done for now, and it is challenging, no doubt, if you've never done this like me. Be prepared to use more fabric than you think. The first blob on the driver's side, I did it 3 times. This one I did it in one go, so that went better, and I'm sure if I did it again it would become easier and easier, but anyways, that's done. I can move on. I've been carried away working, so I forgot to film. But this is where I am. I started cutting and mounting the middle pieces of tongue and groove cedar. The beginning is the most difficult because you have to make sure that they're perfectly aligned, because otherwise everything else will get screwed up if they're not. I think I'm doing good so far. What I'm doing, once I'm convinced that one piece is perfectly placed, I unscrew it and then screw it again. But before that, I apply a small bead of Sikaflex between the furring strip and the cedar. So each board is actually glued and screwed. So this is how much progress I've made so far. All these boards are in place permanently. I glued them with a little bit of Sikaflex and screwed them to the furring strips. Around the ceiling fan there's plywood subframe, let's call it. That's probably 1.5 inches wide underneath. Again, all the paneling is screwed and glued to that subframe. I've made all the cutouts for the pot lights. This was a challenge because I can't drill here in the van. I don't want to risk puncturing the vapor barrier. which means I had to cut at times several of these boards and then transfer them to the bench, drill them on the bench, come back here, do a test fit, and then finally mount them. So that wasn't easy. It took a lot of time to do. Nothing's easy in a van. But anyways, I'm quite happy with my progress. So as you can see, I've been progressing slowly with the ceiling. I'm almost done with the driver's side. It was quite a bit of work to cut all the boards around the foam blobs. I've had to make several pieces that I used as templates and fine-tune gradually. And I'm now down to the last piece along the wall on the driver's side. Well, I'm done with the paneling on the ceiling. That was quite a lot of work, a lot more work than I thought, just because there are so many small cuts to make and precise too. But I'm quite happy with the way it turned out. So now I'm gonna have to blend some carpenter's glue with the sawdust and fill all the hole screws, which I've done in some places. I'm gonna try to show you. So you can see here where the screws are still visible. And then here I fill them. I still have to do some sanding, but it makes the ceiling look much nicer. So I'm ready to start varnishing the ceiling. Last night I put a drop sheet across the cab here so I won't stain. I also sanded the ceiling so that way the dust is not gonna go in the cab at the front. And this is the varnish that I'm going to be using. It's the Watco crystal lacquer, which is supposed to be totally colorless. I had an unpleasant surprise yesterday that I want to share with you. Maybe someone watching can explain to me what happened. I put the first coat of this lacquer varnish on the cedar paneling, and that went well. It is recommended to wait 2 hours between coats, and the varnish dries to the touch in 30 minutes, so I thought I'd clean my brush. So I used a paint thinner in food can, clean of course, and well, the paint thinner didn't really clean the brush really well. There was some gunk that stayed in the bristles. But anyways, I came back 2 hours later, dried the brush, and went with the second coat. And slowly, as the varnish was starting to dry, these kind of dry spots, I think there's one you should be able to see here, started to appear, dry and whitish, and in some places the varnish actually dried like it was white paint. You can see it here. Like it really looks like white paint. There's a couple of spots here. In some other places between the boards, you can tell it looks like white paint. And I'm not sure how that happened. Is it the paint thinner that I used instead of lacquer thinner that caused this? I was wondering if maybe the inner layer of the food can, which is some kind of plastic, I suppose, dissolved with the paint thinner and created a reaction. I'm really mystified. Like I wore blue latex gloves, and they had these white spots on them. Really weird. And anyways, so the rest of the ceiling went well, which tells me that after the brush got saturated with varnish, then whatever happened kind of disappeared, because the rest of the ceiling looks fine. It's about the first third or so. So this morning I'm going to sand these boards, at least the areas that are affected. There's a number. And then reapply varnish. Yesterday I got some lacquer thinner, so I was able to clean the brush properly. And I'll use it again this morning and see what happens. I applied 2 coats to the dry spots, the whitish spots after sanding, and that took care of that. And then after all of that was dry, I applied a 3rd coat as recommended by the varnish manufacturer over the whole ceiling so that everything would be as best as possible. And it's drying right now. It's dry to the touch, but so yeah, it looks good. And I took the drop sheet off. The blobs are okay. They didn't get stained or anything. Haha, it can happen. So yeah, quite satisfied with it, the way it looks. And now the next step, I think, once it's really dry, I will mount the LED spotlights, the trim piece here for the ceiling fan. By the way, the van came with this ceiling fan, but there's no brand name on it. I'm not sure what model or make it is. But I did find a generic plastic frame on Amazon, very narrow. So I ordered it, and actually it fits nicely, so I'll show you once it's all done. But I spray painted it black. I didn't really like the idea of the white frame. I think it looks like cheap plastic. And actually the black paint looks really nice. It gives it a nice little texture, and I think it's going to work out well. It's a satisfying feeling to have light inside the van. I tested the ceiling fan, it works fine. And I've got 2 spotlights now installed and temporarily wired to a power supply just to make sure everything works before I go further. So zone 1 will be the forefront spotlights, and then I'll have zone 2, which will be the 2 spotlights above the bed. All the spotlights are connected and working. I think at this point I can consider the ceiling as completed. Another box that can be ticked. So this completes this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you find this video interesting, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.